The Dane Hills of Leicestershire are said to be home to the terrifying witch or banshee known as Black Annis. She lived in the caves, carving it out herself with her clawed hands. At night, she stalked the woods, looking for children to prey on, and her howls and screeches could be heard for miles. Black Annis has black, mangled hair, pale blue skin, and wears the skin and skulls of dead innocents she has feasted upon. The local people of the area would lock doors, bolt windows, and huddle around fires when night fell, listening to the screams in the distance. However, the threat of Black Annis did not stop one angry stepmother sending her children out into the woods to collect firewood one evening.
Go to the woods and collect some firewood.
The story goes that the two youngest children were terrified.
Oh, I'm scared.
It's okay, hopefully Black Annis isn't in here.
But the oldest consoled them, saying if they started to collect firewood, now they could be back before nightfall, and that Black Annis only hunted in the deepest parts of the woods, and they were only going to the edges. But there was no firewood at the edges, and the children found themselves going even deeper into the woods. Night fell, and just before the eldest was about to suggest turning back, they heard a distant scream echoing around the woods.
Black Annis is here!
The two youngest began to cry, but the oldest once again took the initiative, saying that if they were to run now, they could have a chance at escaping her. The youngest produced a witch stone, which has a hole in through it, which Black Annis could be seen far off in the distance. She was lifting up her greasy hair and sniffing at the air. The children sprinted towards their home, desperate to escape from the witch who started to pursue them.
Take that!
When they neared home, their father ran out the door, relieved to see them alive. Armed with an axe, the black figure of Annis loomed.
Get back!
He burst forward and threw his axe straight into the hag's head. She gave a wail, and green blood sputtered forth from her temple. She turned and fled back to her cave to recover from her wounds.
The story goes that the children must be in bed before 9 o'clock. Otherwise, the 9 o'clock horses will come and take you away. The horses ride through the streets at night, checking in the windows of children. If they spot you awake, they'll take you away. The threat from the parents goes, the 9 o'clock horses will get you. The horses become riderless, burning-eyed, flying through the night sky from, perhaps, the mouth of hell itself. Those poor beasts of smelly, thankful burden have transformed into the wild, cruel horses of unjustable power. Often the horses are imagined through the children's minds as riders skeletal and galloping through the air, as well as being black with cold red eyes, likely capable of flight. Over 150 years ago, there was a local law that rubbish would be collected after 9 p.m. Domestic waste was either thrown in ditches or gutters, piled in backyards, or placed in a communal or neighbourhood yards. In the night, farm labourers would come into the city to collect waste products to use as manure on surrounding farmlands. These were called the night soil men. Leicester had a local by-law which stated that the night soil men could not collect the waste until after 9 o'clock at night. People were moving out of the countryside into the city to earn their fortune at this time, so farm labour was scarce. Child labour was cheap, so any child caught wandering the streets of the city could also be collected and taken back into the farms as labour.
Bel the giant lived in Leicestershire and was known as a terrible bragger and boaster. Bel would say, "I could get to Leicester on my horse in 3 leagues from this very spot, for I'm not Bel the giant." Somebody challenged him about this.
I bet you can't get to Leicester in 3 weeks.
"I bet I can get to Leicester." So he accepted a wager, and at a place called Farmer's House, he mounted his great sorrel charger horse. That place is called Mount Sorrel to this day. He gathered himself up, he called to his steed, and away he went up in the air. A great long leap, and he reached a place halfway to Leicester. That place being called Runlet ever since. Bel drew himself up, roared at his charger, and leapt again. But then there was a terrible bursting and crackling noise like whips of leather, a roaring noise like a tree falling down. It was Bel's harness, Bel's horse and Bel's bones. His bones themselves had burst with the great long leap. He fell to the earth, a place 2 sides away from Leicester. That place has been called Bristol ever since. He urged on his dying horse with his great spurs, and away he went again with his harness flying in one direction. But Bel had boasted too much. It was too long a leap for him, and he came down groaning at a place 1.5 miles from Leicester. And there Bel the giant and his horse rolled over dead, and were buried in one great grave. That place has since been called Belgrave.
Papillion Hall was built in 1622 and belonged to a family of Huguenot descent. David Papillion was born in 1691 and became the house's owner upon adulthood. Local people feared him and believed he was in league with the devil. Rumours swelled that he could hypnotise people and keep them static until he chose to release them. His name was Lord Pam or Old Pam. A further rumour was that David Papillion kept a Spanish lady in the east attic of Papillion Hall. She was a virtual prisoner and could only exercise on a hall's flat roof. The story goes that Papillion killed her, and with her dying breath, she cast her green slippers and said,
"They must never leave the hall after my death, for if they do, terrible misfortune will befall the owner of the house."
Marion Pike described the slippers as being lovely and made of white kid and covered with green and silver brocade, with 3-inch heels and a pointed toes. Each subsequent purchaser of Papillion Hall was warned about the slippers, and stories of the ghost of the Spanish lady haunting the hall developed. In the 19th century, then owner Thomas Halford loaned the slippers to an exhibit in Paris for a year.
They adore the slippers.
But life at Papillion Hall soon became unbearable, and his family had to move out. And following owner, C. Walker built a special display case for them above the fireplace. Walker sold the hall to Captain Frank Belville.
It's your house now.
in 1903, who rebuilt it. Rumours that a skeleton was found in the east attic started to spread. Belville lent the slippers to Leicester Museum in 1909. He subsequently had a bad fall from a horse and fractured his skull before a storm blew through the hall, causes damage and a fire. Captain then decided to return the slippers to their display case and threw the key into a nearby pond. During World War II, American airmen were stationed at the hall. 2 airmen are said to have taken 1 slipper each, perhaps as a souvenir. Both were killed in battle soon after. The slippers returned to Pedestrian Hall each time. But when the airmen left the house in 1945, there was only 1 slipper in the display case. The hall was demolished in 1951, and the missing slipper was found beneath the floorboard. They were sent to a surviving member of the Papillion family, who donated the slippers to Leicester Costume Museum. They are now in the ownership of Harbour Museum.